Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lysha and I am the owner of Lysha Be Creative. Today I'm back with another tumbler tutorial and we are going to jump into a beach tumbler design. So this is probably the first beach tumbler I have made in quite a long time and definitely only the second on my channel, but I'm really excited to show you guys a sort of traditional beach look but in a new, different and fun way. So of course everything I use in today's video will be listed and linked down in the description box down below, and you can even find some discount codes down there as well for you. Before you leave, be sure to give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and that's about it. Let's go ahead and jump right into today's video. Alright, so I am starting with a 20-ounce sublimated tumbler. This is a 20-ounce slim, and you guys have seen me. I've already showed these on my channel, but what I've just gone ahead and done is I have just sanded the cup and then I have spray painted this white. So as you can see, this was actually a design beforehand that I was trying out, and it just didn't quite work out the way I wanted to, so I'm going to revisit that design at another time, but I decided to spray paint over this cup with a flat white spray paint, and now all I'm doing is applying some painter's tape. So for this design, we're kind of going with a V-split design, although it will not be a perfect V-split. I kind of wanted this like irregular look, and the only way that I could like grasp that in my head was by starting with a V-split sort of look, but I'm not really making sure to pay real close attention to making sure either side is even. I just want there to be kind of beach and water present on all sections of the cup, but not like your traditional ombre sort of cups with when it comes to beach tumblers where the sand's on the bottom and then the water, you know, kind of blends into that. I wanted this to be a little bit different. So after I've kind of gotten my V kind of placed on the cup how I want it to be, I'm just going to go ahead and cover the lower section of this cup with painter's tape all the way over, including the bottom as well. The first step in the process is of course going to be spray painting this cup and getting it prepped to base paint and match the colors that we're going to be using for the glitter we'll apply to this. So now that I have my first section all sort of taped off, I'm going to go ahead and take these two Rustoleum paints, Seaside and Ocean Mist, and we're going to do like a light ombre. So as you'll see, I kind of followed the Ocean Mist, the lighter color, along the V section, and then I went in with Seaside over the top. So although we're going to use 3 shades of blue here, I decided to just stick with 2 just because I knew that my darker colors really aren't going to make a huge difference as far as what kind of base paint there is, since they're such opaque colors. After I've removed the tape from the first section, after letting that dry, we're going to go ahead and get some tape applied to cover up the paint section here. And so what you'll see me do is I've just ripped off, sections of 1-inch painter's tape, and I've rubbed it along the table, and this is to take off the stickiness from the painter's tape. I really want to make sure that my painter's tape does not pull up on the base paint that I've already placed on the cup. And so if I remove a little bit of the sticky from the back of the tape, I'll less likely have issues with this pulling up my spray paint. So just another sort of tip and trick that can be helpful for you if you're like me and you want to spray paint multiple colors, but typically run into situations where your paint will pull up or your tape will pull up your paint. Removing the sticky either by rubbing it on a table or on your clothing will really help to remove that sticky but still allow it to be sticky enough to stick to those sections, and then you can go ahead and sort of tape the sections off you need to without damaging what's under it. So after I've kind of sectioned off the V, so covered up the blue section along that V section, I'm going to take a little bit of some saran wrap, some plastic wrap here just from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and just stretch that over the rest of the blue section versus trying to cover up that entire section with tape like we did the first time around, because I don't want any additional risk of damage being caused to my paint, and I definitely don't want to get any of the new colored spray paint all over this cup. So I'm just going to tape that down with a little bit of blue painter's tape, get that sort of saran wrap or plastic wrap just adhered there nicely. That way I can make sure that I don't get any overspray under that piece. And we're going to go ahead and take this out to spray paint the sand color with this beautiful tan color we have here from Color Shop. Now we are going to go ahead, after this has dried, The paint didn't take too long to dry, but we're going to go ahead and remove just the saran wrap right now, just the plastic wrap. And I've mixed up 5 ml of epoxy here, and I'm going to go ahead and apply just a very thin coat and layer of epoxy to just the tan or sand color that we have going on here. We will also do epoxy glitter application to the top blue portion where the ocean or water will be, but we're going to do this in sections, of course, because I want to still be able to control my glitter while I'm applying it. So once I've gotten a nice thin coat of epoxy on my cup, we can go ahead and get our glitters applied. I'm going to be using Full Moon and Biscotti, both from Lysha Creations. They're listed right here, as well as the other colors we're going to be using for this beach cup, and where you can get them, as well as my discount code. So going in with Full Moon, which is a little bit of a chunkier sort of, I would call this more of an off-white color. It's definitely not white, but it's not quite gold. It's kind of like that in-between color. And so I'm going to use this as my chunky, right? You guys know I like to layer my colors, of course, and my cuts of glitter. And so I'm just going over that entire section, and I am just sprinkling a little bit of that on. Now we're going to go in with Biscotti. So Biscotti is an irregular cut glitter, but it's more of a fine irregular cut glitter. And what I love about this is it's definitely more of that tan sand color, but it has these beautiful sort of like cellophane looking pieces, in that they give this really beautiful iridescent shift, which I think is just perfect to mimic sand, and certainly different from the traditional sticking with sort of gold base colors to represent the sand on your beach cup. Now that my sand looks pretty good, I'm satisfied with how that looks. I'm now going to carefully remove the tape that was separating my tan and blue ocean water sections. That way, I can go back in with a new glove and a little bit of that epoxy I have left to be able to get this section epoxied. So again, a super thin layer of epoxy here. I'm just using the little bit that was left in the cup that I had originally mixed up. And we're going to go ahead and get this applied. So I am being very careful, obviously, not to damage the glitter that I've already spent time putting on the cup. So just being very mindful about how I'm dragging my finger along that edge, but still making sure to get all the way up to that edge, because we don't want any bare spots or bald spots on our cup that aren't covered in glitter. So just take your time with this. You know, don't feel like you need to rush. Again, I always use a regular setting epoxy, so I have anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes to really work with this epoxy before it's not really going to be helpful to use. But usually that's more than enough time for me to be able to go in between my colors and go in between sections if I'm doing epoxy method, and sort of this sort of way to do a cup, doing two separate sections in, epoxy method glitter application. So we're going to start with Unicorn Dreams, and we're going to lay that as our chunky base. So again, I've already listed all the colors here, but what I want to make sure to do first is, of course, there's going to be quite a bit of layering going on. So starting with Unicorn Dreams, because I don't have sort of a light blue chunky that I thought would be pretty under this, I'm just going to use this transparent or translucent Unicorn Dreams with that sort of rainbow shift that this gives off as sort of my base. It's going to create great dimension in the ocean water we have here to be able to give the cup, sort of that pop and that look, and not sort of that flat look with, lots of the same cut of color that you typically might see. But we're going to go ahead and go in with that. And then after we're done with that, I am going to actually start in the center of this cup today, and we're going to start with Tropical Blues. So this is Tropical Blues. And I'm just being very mindful to try and stay within sort of like this triangled section that I've created with the Seaside Color, but not going all the way to the top, because I want to put a darker color up there. So just sprinkling very nicely in that section. Again, not getting too close to the sand, because I want my lighter colors to be that section, and not getting close to the top, because that'll be my darkest color. So then we're going to go in with Ravenclaw. Ravenclaw is from Peachy Olive Glitter. This is not from Lysha Creation like the other ones I've listed. So I'll list that one right here. And so I'm going to go in with Ravenclaw on the top here. And that is going to be kind of like the deepest part of the ocean, if you will, from, the edge of the shore, the edge of the sand here. So just going in really heavy around the rim and just sprinkling that down into the tropical blue color we had in the center section to be able to blend those together. And then we're going to go in with a newer color that you haven't seen me yet use. This is Bluebird. Bluebird was in one of the My Aisha Creations Glidal subscription boxes. It is now available by itself on the website, so you can certainly pick that up and use my code LyshaB10 to save yourself 10%. But we're going to take that and we're going to go all over sort of that bead section right along the sand line there, and then blend upward into our tropical blues color right in the center there. I'm already really loving how this is coming together. I think it's coming together absolutely beautifully. And again, this is more of a traditional beach look, but again, there are so many sections that you can find on Pinterest that can give you inspiration. You can find inspiration from just a color palette that represents, you know, the ocean. Sunsets are also a great sort of picture to look up on Pinterest or on Google to find inspiration for creating your beach tumblers. I'm going with more traditional look today, but there are so many different designs, and I've already started several beach cups after I had created this one. So definitely stay tuned because I'm sure some more will be joining the channel. After my cup was certainly all glittered, I did let that dry for about 2 to 3 hours really, and then I went in with my coats of epoxy. I do spray seal in between, so I spray sealed with clear gloss Rustoleum spray paint, and then I put that on the turner for 2 coats of Flint Sisters premium epoxy. Each of those coats were probably about 20 mLs. I didn't go too heavy on this cup because I knew I'd be adding some other elements, and so I didn't want it to be too bulky before we get into our final coats. So now the cup is done curing after its 6 to 8 hours that needed to cure on my turner. I've gotten my space heater on for a little bit while it's a little bit chilly still here in New York, and I've just gotten that to cure between 8 and 10 hours depending on, this was sort of left on the turner overnight, so I didn't need a full 24 hours like you sometimes might need for your regular setting epoxies. Now it's time to, of course, do the sanding. I've just sanded the top rim with a 60 grit sanding block, went around the whole cup just to see and make sure that I, knocked off any of those sharp bits that might still be on the cup. And now we are going to get into the next step in the process. So what I've done here is I have taken my magic eraser, my melanin sort of sponges here. These are the ones without soap. And I'm taking Lucid from Jen's Crafted Gems inks. This was in her primary pack listed right here. And I am taking sort of like just a few drops into the sponge, and I am creating the start of our waves here. So I'm going pretty heavy-handed all over this section where the water meets the sand. And I'm getting a really, really beautiful look, sort of like that foamy look that the ocean gives you, when the water meets the sand. And so I was really kind of impressed with doing this. You will see me use some white epoxy dye in my epoxy in the next steps, but I really was quite in awe of how beautiful Lucid was just applying it with a sponge. This is not a technique that I've done before to create my beach waves. I typically always stick to just adding the epoxy dye to epoxy and doing strips of it just like you would for a Milky Way on the turner, but I really do love this look, and I do feel like you can get away with just doing this and not having to add these strings of epoxy, but you are going to see me do this because I do think it does add a little bit more of a waved look or a waved pattern in this sort of foaminess that we're creating with this alcohol ink directly on top of that tumbler. Once I'm satisfied with how this is looking, I kind of just go back and forth, and honestly, I was just so impressed with how beautiful and how much this was starting to look like the ocean. I kind of stared at it for quite a while, but once I'm done with this, I do let my inks sit. I always let them at least dry for overnight, if not a full 24 hours, before I apply any epoxy over top. And so now we're on to the epoxy process. I'm just going to add a thin layer of epoxy over top. We are going to add a little bit of glitter right now. I'm going to add some Fulori here, and I'm going to take this glitter. So this is like a chunky, almost translucent color, but it's got more of a blue shift. And what I'm doing is I am just lining that chunky glitter and just sprinkling it into all of that white section that we created using the alcohol ink Lucid. So I'm being very careful. I'm really just trying my best to cover up where the blue ocean water meets the sand color we have going on here. I don't want there to be such an apparent harsh line, and so I'm going to get around that a little bit by applying this glitter sort of right along that line and sprinkling that in. as well as adding my strings of epoxy, which you're going to see me do next. So I did let this sit on the turner, and I let the rest of my epoxy in a cup sit for probably about 20-ish minutes. I really wanted my epoxy to be rather thick before I added the, lines of white epoxy to create the additional waves onto this. I wanted it to be thick because sometimes if it's too thin, you can get too much movement happening. And so letting my epoxy thicken up a little bit, even after that first coat is applied, I really felt like I had a little bit more control and didn't have to be so worrisome when I introduced my heat gun and getting too much movement. So just taking that white epoxy, and I am just taking my little metal stir stick and just creating sort of like a wavy or squiggly line all the way around the edge of the ocean that meets the sand. And what I loved was happening here as I used my heat gun is it was creating that beautiful like fan that you can get when you are putting waves on a tumbler with the addition of the white epoxy dye, but it also was giving like that foamy look. It was kind of just adding to that foamy look that we created with Lucid, but also giving like that waved look. So there was different dimensions of waves happening with the introduction of this, and I do think that this combination of the alcohol ink and adding the lines of waves in with your white epoxy dye is definitely the way to go to get the most authentic looking sort of ocean waved look on a beach tumbler. So I'm definitely going to try this for other designs I have. As you can see, I have been going crazy with the beach tumblers and lots of different designs. So again, it doesn't have to be the traditional look. There are so many different ways that you can create beach cups. So it doesn't always have to be sort of this traditional blue that I'm showing you, and lots of inspiration all over the place. So after I had done my lines of epoxy, I do let this sit on the turner. Of course, torch it for any bubbles, but I'm going to let this sit on the turner until it's fully cured. So about 8 to 10 hours before I take this off and move on to the next step. So now that the cup is off the turner, I'm ready to go ahead and get into applying our decals. So all these decals I did get from Creative Fabrica. I will link them down in the description box. The only ones that were from Cricut Design Space were the little footprints, as well as one of the additional palm trees I had to add after the fact. So starting with the larger palm trees that I found on Creative Fabrica, and it had a bunch of different silhouettes of palm trees, a really great selection of them. And so I'm adding sort of these intertwined ones, and this will kind of be almost the main focal point. We have this decal, of course, that says drink in hand, toes in the sand, which actually was a decal that was, one on top of the other, but I decided to separate it and remove the other elements like the seashell and the actual drink, just because I didn't feel like it was going to go with the aesthetic of my cup really. But most of this I cut on gold Cricut textured foil or textured metallic vinyl. It's my favorite vinyl. You guys know this. I love, love, love this textured metallic vinyl from Cricut. You also can buy it from a couple other places as well. And so I've just applied the palm trees first. That's kind of like the main focal point. And so I want it to be kind of off-centered from like that front-facing V. So sort of off to the side. And so in the sand, we're going to put the toes in the sand section, which is cut on the Tech Wrap Craft vinyl. It's hollow. I think it's blue green. I'll definitely link it. I always forget what these are called because they have different names, but I will link it down in the description box, of course, so that you guys can grab this. I love using sort of like the hollow, opal colored vinyls on top of beach cups. I just feel like it makes everything pop, and there's no there's nothing wrong with having some additional pop features onto your cup. So after I've applied that part of the decal, we're going to go ahead and add the footprints. So I just kind of place them on either corner of the decal. Wherever you want is fine. I wasn't really sure where I wanted to place these originally or how the cup was going to come together. So this was kind of an element that I had thought of after the fact and had gone back into Cricut to sort of cut this piece as well, because I felt like it just added to sort of the vibe that we're going for this beach look. Now, after we have gotten those two elements done, now we're going to go ahead and add the drink in hand section, that first section of the SVG that I got from Creative Fabrica. So for here, we're going to put this over the water section, and I wanted it to be close to the palm tree, but I didn't want it to touch or overlap, of course, because they're the same color, and so obviously you wouldn't then really be able to see the decal. So I did kind of off center this. It is not directly above the V like you would for traditional V split, right? So I did kind of off center it, and then it was at this point I'm looking at the cup that I realized I needed to add another additional palm tree to really make this look a little bit more purposeful, because right now it was looking a little bit off with that decal up front. The back looked absolutely gorgeous, but this front section, this front side section, if you will, was looking a little bit like it needed something additional. So I went back to Cricut and cut another palm tree, but I cut it in the vinyl, the same vinyl that we did with the toes in the sand section of the SVG. And I decided to place that just off centered of the drink in hand SVG up top. It just really helped to, again, bring the aesthetic of the cup together and not sort of leave that decal that was up front in the front of the cup kind of hanging. I just felt like it needed a little bit of something. So going back to grab this palm tree was definitely the best choice to be able to continue to add to the look of the cup, and of course fill up some of that extra space. So after this was all done, I do apply a thin layer of polyacrylic all over my decals to make sure I don't get any epoxy repelling, but then this goes back on the turner for 2 final coats of epoxy. And you guys know I love using my Flynn Sisters Premium Epoxy. It gives me the most beautiful, luscious looking shine. Definitely encourage you to check it out. Discount code and a link to that is down in the description box. But I hope that you guys did enjoy today's video and tutorial. This is getting me so ready for summer that I cannot wait to be spending the day on the beach somewhere this summer. So definitely be sure to tell me what you loved about today's video, and of course give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And you guys know that I will see you in the next one. Bye!